going anywhere!
Rebecca woke every morning before the sun stretched its golden fingers across the dusty village. While the world was still quiet, she was already moving, careful not to wake her 3-year-old son Tunde on the thin mat they shared. Her life was a cycle of fetching water from distant streams, scrubbing heavy laundry for neighbors, and carrying loads that made her back ache long before noon. She didn't mind the labor. She minded the silence of her home, a silence that was too heavy for a place that was supposed to hold love. And then there was Femi. He was her husband in name, but in that house he was a storm that never passed. He worked at the factory on the edge of town, a place that seemed to swallow a man's kindness and return him empty. He was cold, cruel, and lived as though Rebecca and Tunde were burdens he was forced to carry. One evening, Rebecca finished cooking a small pot of watery soup, the only meal she could provide after a long day of washing. The door flung open, and Femi stepped in, his eyes scanning the room like a predator. He looked at the pot, and his voice turned low and dangerous. He asked what the smell was, and when Rebecca softly explained it was all they had, he didn't see her effort. He only saw his own frustration. He called her a failure, a complete failure who couldn't even provide a proper meal. The slap that followed cut through the air like a whip. Rebecca staggered back, her hand to her cheek, but she didn't cry. She had learned that tears only made him angrier. Femi kicked the pot, watching the soup spill across the floor, wasted just like the years she had given him. He grabbed his keys and walked out into the night, headed for the arms of a woman named Amina. Amina was everything Rebecca was not. She wore bright, expensive fabrics, while Rebecca wore faded wrappers. Amina received gifts and laughter, while Rebecca received blows and insults. Femi gave Amina the money Rebecca had earned with her own sweat, believing he was buying a better life. The turning point came when Rebecca realized her secret savings were gone. She had hidden a few crumpled notes in a small wooden box, a tiny bit of hope for her son's future. Femi had found it and taken it all. When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. He told her he had given the money to Amina because she was beautiful and clean, unlike the trash he had at home. He told her she deserved nothing. That night, something inside Rebecca broke, but it wasn't her spirit. It was the chain of hope that had kept her tied to him. She didn't shout, she didn't beg. She simply waited for the world to go quiet. Before the first rooster crowed, she woke Tunde, packed their few belongings, and walked out of that house. She didn't look back at the cracked walls or the patched roof. She walked toward the neighboring town, toward a life where she didn't have to hide her face in shame. Weeks passed, and Femi barely noticed they were gone. He was too busy chasing Amina, pouring his heart and his wages into her hands. He thought he had finally escaped the failure of his marriage, but his world shattered the day he went to surprise Amina and found her compound decorated for a wedding. There was music, dancing, and laughter. When he asked who was getting married, a stranger pointed to the radiant bride. It was Amina, standing beside a man named Abraham. The gift Femi had bought her fell to the ground. He stood in the shadows as the truth washed over him. Amina had never loved him. She had used his money to fund her dowry and her wedding to the man she truly wanted. He had been the fool, the one being used and discarded, exactly as he had done to Rebecca. Femi returned to an empty house that now felt like a tomb. For the first time, the silence was unbearable. There was no one to blame, no one to hurt, and no one to care if he ate or slept. He began to search for Rebecca. Not out of love, but out of a desperate need to reclaim the power he had lost. After weeks of searching, he found her in a neighboring town. He expected to see her struggling, But when the gates of a large, beautiful compound opened, a woman stepped out who he barely recognized. It was Rebecca, but she stood taller and stronger. Her clothes were fine, her skin was glowing, and the bruises on her face had been replaced by a calm, unshakable peace. Beside her stood a man who treated her with the respect she had always deserved, and Tende was running through the grass, laughing and healthy. Femi called her name, his voice trembling with a regret that had come far too late. He begged her to come back. He promised he had changed. He told her they needed to fix their home. Rebecca looked at him, not with anger, but with a pity that hurt more than any insult. She told him that the house they shared was never a home. She told him she had endured his cruelty, not because she was weak, but because she believed he could become better. But he didn't, so she did. She had realized her own worth, and that realization was a door that would never open for him again. As the gates closed, Femi was left standing in the dust of his own making. He finally understood that you cannot treat a person like trash and expect them to remain a treasure for you. Love is not a thing you can destroy and then demand back when you are lonely. Rebecca had taken the life she earned, leaving Femi with the only thing he truly deserved, the weight of his own regret. Moral lesson: never treat a diamond like a stone and expect it to stay in the dirt. By the time you finally realize a person's worth, they've already realized their own, and they won't look back.